Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. Today we are continuing our journey through Bob Dylan's discography, and we are now on Oh Mercy. This is considered a comeback album of sorts. Was it an absolute favorite of mine? Not really. I'd say the overall experience of this one is I felt like each song was a job well done, but I'm not sure if I fell in love with any one song in particular. The first track on this one is the interestingly titled Political World. The first thought I had while listening to this album was just about the music. The production choices on it, I felt like describing as nuanced. Unlike the last through albums, which were, emphatically a mixture of Bob Dylan's folky voice with 1980s synthetic instruments, this production doesn't sound specific to any decade. It doesn't really sound old school, but it's certainly not of its moment either. It's just kind of a good sound. And Political World, interestingly, it starts out with a kind of thin sound, but an intriguing thin sound that kind of reminded me of No Reply by the Beatles. Now, as for the substance of Political World, I imagine many people see that title and think it's too vague for a protest song. What does it mean to call something political? I remember finding it really funny and annoying when the young conservatives at my school tried to recruit people by saying, "Are you interested in politics?" And I felt like saying to them, "Yeah, I'm interested in politics, but not in austerity and war and whatever other horrible things you believe in." But I think where Dylan is coming from here, and that he made clear back on his 1984 album, Infidels, is that he basically resents politics. He implied back then on the song Man of Peace that virtually all politicians in his eyes are con men. So in this song, when Bob Dylan calls the world political, he's referring to politics as this dark space that exists outside of art, outside of philosophy, and outside of compassion. For him, politics and politicians are one and the same, and that's why he leads with the song, this scathing, repetitive, but in a sort of appealing, bluesy way, political world. Track number 2 is called Teardrops Fall. And unlike the relatively monotone Political World, the emotion here allows this song to be a bit more flowing, a bit more elegant. Despite its title, this song actually has a kind of Hawaiian sound in the background that ends up making it sound like one of the happier songs on the album. Track number 3 takes us back to grumpy, bluesy Dylan, and it's called Everything is Broken. The way this song manages to sound a bit more interesting than your standard blues songs is it develops a bit of a unique rhythm around being based around two-word phrases. The harmonica, meanwhile, sounds a little bit non-traditional with its reverb, and there's also some kind of hand drum on there, so it just makes the song sound a bit less than traditional, even if it's very simple writing. One could say this is another political song on the record. There is a reference to broken treaties, but for the most part, this is just Bob Dylan doing one of his classic Americana songs, and after that title track, he's kind of left politics in the background. Track number 4 is called Ring Them Bells. This is one of the first truly piano-centric Dylan songs we've seen in a while. I don't remember exactly when we last heard Bob Dylan playing piano, but I thought it sounds a lot better than those piano songs we heard on the 1960s albums, because on those it was often just the piano was way too emphasized, whereas here we hear the piano a bit. It gives the song a unique character, but nonetheless, Daniel Lanois completes the production on the rest of the song. This song is also a wonderful vocal delivery on Bob Dylan's part. We get a bit of the gravelly side of his voice, but it's not just gruff, gravelly, cool to touch. There's a lot of emotion. It truly sounds like he's crying when he's singing this song. As for the lyrics, this song names different saints and church bells, so it's possibly inspired by the old nursery rhyme, Oranges and Lemons, or the folk song, The Bells of Rimney, but it's trying to take that sort of dark message and make it a bit more pure and spiritual. Track number 5 is called Man in the Long Black Coat. On this song, Dylan's voice gets a bit lower, and combined with the smoky acoustic guitar riffs, this sounds more like a Leonard Cohen song than a Bob Dylan song. It arguably echoes the pessimism of Political World, as this song sees Dylan seemingly denouncing charismatic figures, like preachers, and perhaps that's a metaphor for also denouncing charismatic politicians. What makes the voice on this song unique, though pessimistic, is he kind of splits up this world as being broken up between these dark, powerful figures, these so-called men in long black coats, while painting the rest of us as more innocent, but also more feeble, as if we're powerless. We can either just stand idly by or give in to the demands of the men in the long black coat, as he sings, but people don't live or die. People just float. Track number 6 is called Most of the Time. So Long Black Coat ends with the sound of crickets, and it transitions nicely into this kind of folkloric, spiritual sounding song most of the time. This is an unusual relationship song in that it seems to be written well after the actual breakup happened, and it suggests a relationship to the ex, where it's not so much that the singer regrets the breakup for logical reasons, but rather is like being haunted years later by images of the ex and is regretting something more abstract, and now it's manifesting as nightmares. One thing that I would say is a good thing on this album is that a number of these songs have bridges, a distinct melodic part towards the middle or late middle of the song to kind of raise the stakes, whereas usually Bob Dylan was just a guy who wrote repetitive verses and choruses. And what bridges do in a lot of songs, including with this one, is it brings a vulnerability into Dylan's voice. My frustration with his previous album, Down in the Groove, is lots of the time he just sounded low-key melancholy or detached. And this album, even as it's still very melancholy, it allows it to be a heartfelt, passionate melancholy. And the choice to write these songs with bridges really helps with that. A final thing I thought while listening to this song is I wondered whether Bob Dylan was specifically revisiting his breakup with his first wife, Sarah, from years ago. And the reason I thought that is I heard a harmonica riff that sounded very much like the one from Sarah. Now, when I went back and listened, that harmonica riff actually was part of Man in the Long Black Coat, but the lyrics of this one kind of mixed in my head with that harmonica riff to make me think, is that what's going on? Track number 7 is called What Good Am I? This song musically sounds a bit like the Blood on the Track song, Buckets of Rain, but with more of a gospel feel thrown in. This one makes good use of dramatic pauses, so it forces you to really listen to the instruments, which is unusual for a songwriter like Bob Dylan, whose songs are really just about their lyrics. The music is never anything fancy. And the music here isn't necessarily anything fancy either, but it sounds pretty, and the structure of the song gives you a chance to appreciate that. And on top of that, the dramatic pauses also enhance the meaning of the song. It comes across as if Bob Dylan, or the singer of the song, is really questioning his moral worth, his absence in the life of others. And when you hear those little organ riffs, it's like you're hearing a pin drop implying an environment of loneliness or abandonment. Track number 8 is called Disease of Conceit. So up until now, I've really liked the production on this album. As I said, it was really nuanced. It didn't sound specific to one decade. Everything was always just the right volume. So I thought Daniel Lanois did an excellent job of bringing out the best in Bob Dylan's sound. That said, these songs do, by the time you get late in the album, start to all sound similar. So while Daniel Lanois and Bob Dylan and the other musicians found a good formula, I wish they had shaken things up a little bit. And by the time we get to track 8, Diseases of Conceit, I'm starting to feel a bit overwhelmed about the melancholy. What is cool about the song is that Dylan kind of realizes midway through that people might say, hey, this is a bit of a generic metaphor saying conceit is a disease. And so Bob Dylan ups the ante with his lyrical delivery as if to say, this isn't just a metaphor. I'm literally saying conceit is a disease. I'm literally saying I've seen ego kill people. Track number 9 is called What Was It You Wanted? So this continues the feel of track 6 most of the time, as if, sudden regrets from the past manifest as if in a nightmare. And they're raising questions that, because they're so far in the past, the singer is acknowledging will never be answered. The harmonica on this one is very weird. It's awkwardly louder than the other instruments. I was just saying that the production on this record feels so perfect, though when something is off, like the harmonica here, one has to think that it's intentional. And maybe the harmonica on this track symbolizes invasive thoughts, these memories of past regret that you can't do anything about. So you really don't want to be thinking about them, but you end up thinking about them. Track number 10 was a nice song, the conclusion of the album, and it really sounded like a conclusion. It's called Shooting Star. And like track 6 and 9, it's again about these memories of a past lover coming back. But what I think makes this one a bit more pleasant is by turning these memories into a sort of metaphor that works, a shooting star, something that's beautiful but out of reach that you will never touch. It sort of brings it to completion, and that sort of bright imagery nicely accents the nice completeness of Lanois' production. So I guess my feelings about Oh Mercy are complex. I'm certainly someone who likes a lot of melancholy songs, but I'm also someone who can be overwhelmed by there being too much of them at once. I think a lot of these songs individually, Shooting Star, What Good Am I, most of the time, Man in the Long Black Coat, they're all individually very good, but maybe the combination is just a bit too repetitive. You know, it's funny, when AllMusic wrote a positive review of this album, they said it was Dylan's like most cohesive album in years. So I feel like sometimes music critics praise albums for having a run-through theme which extends to all the music sounding kind of similar. I mean, I guess that shows that the singer or the producer was inspired by something. But for me, that's the one real weakness. We have a lot of beautiful songs here. The production is really well done, but I think you have to mix in that beautiful with that fun. And there's never quite the fun on this album. And it leaves you kind of having to cry. Oh, mercy. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.